So we're gonna dive right into our main segment.
That's right. The heart and soul.
Oh.
The heart and soul of our love for beer. Why? The tradition and the unique quirks that brought us here.
Yeah. So for me, the things that I really like about the space that really drew me in was the history and the art of craft beer and the community that comes with it. Beer's been around for a really long time, and I feel like a lot of times it kind of gets overlooked as just like this college drink. And I think there was kind of a time and place, and there are beers for that. But like once you really get into the craft, there's so much history behind beer in general that it's one of the oldest drinks out there. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like beer's been around for 13,000 years, and it was around before bread. Like, that's so wild to think about. That
isn't it safer, or wasn't it safer back then to drink beer? Back then, being like, what'd you say, like 13,000 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, even much sooner than that, like alcohol, sure. Because the process behind it and the alcohol in it and the ingredients like actually helped like sterilize the water, so it was safer to drink than water, and so it kind of became the main sustenance for people. And it was thicker; it was more like porridge, so it was a bit more. It was more like food,
right?
And so like even like the Egyptians,
liquid bread.
Yeah, like Egyptians used to pay their workers in beer. Like it was really low alcohol. It wasn't meant to be like the fun social drink that it is now, but. I love those pieces of it. I love the community that it brings in and how the craft space is just like such a big family. Like
it really is.
I love that aspect. I mean, I feel like nobody really feels like they're competing against each other. They're trying to like fight for the bigger good of just craft beer being this big, beautiful space. And I love that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the most part, there's no competition, but, without a little competition, you also don't get as good of results.
Yeah. No, there is. It's just not as like cutthroat. It's like
progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not cutthroat.
It's like a frenemy.
Cutthroat.
Frenemy.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have partnerships and collaborations. For sure. Speaking of, Collab Fest is coming up in January? March.
End of March.
Samsonite. End of March.
Yeah, end of March.
But we are going, right?
Here we got tickets.
Sweet. See you there.
Excited. Also, Black Friday sale. Thanks.
Oh.
Thanks, Brewer Guild. $10 off.
Brewers Guild. Yeah. Yeah, same. And it could be, so growing up, my family owned a bar in small town, South Dakota. And I remember like one of the favorite parts that my dad would share with us, or like my grandpa, would be the stories with their bar flies, right? They called them bar flies. That's nothing new. A lot of people have heard that. But it is a sense of community, and whatever that is, right? Like we'll get into it. What is it about a gathering and having a beverage? It doesn't, especially in today's day and age, they're saying, hey, we don't always need an alcoholic beverage to sit and have a conversation. Yeah. But oftentimes that's how it's been. So for me, it definitely starts at a very young age. I grew up with a jukebox. I grew up with a pool table. I grew up with, old war guys sitting at the bar drinking Budweiser and PBR Light when that was still a thing. You know what I mean? I think that was like my grandma's favorite beer. To your point, is that community, and what does it mean to sit around and tell random barstool confessions or celebrate? So you're telling your war stories, or you're celebrating an event, right? Oftentimes so beer was seen way back when, take us back, as more of a poor man's drink or just a way to sustain. Whereas you often bring up where wine is often the star of the show when we think about pairing or the complexity of creating.
Which I would say is like a big passion piece for you, right? Like the food and the beer pairing part. I mean, you're so good at cooking and then pairing these things together. Yes. Like I would have a hard time believing that wasn't a big piece for getting your draw into this space as well.
Absolutely. So it's not necessarily about the brewing science. It's more like, here's these amazing craft brews and here's some amazing foods. What happens when we combine two supernovas together and we slay the dragon? You know what I mean? They're like, no. Some of you do. Yeah, absolutely. That's totally a passion point. I think I want to get on here. And I mean, we've been doing this for years. Why not like we're always just sitting around talking about it. Why wouldn't we just start recording it and sharing those stories and that passion? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's a piece that I've left bartending a handful of times and always come back. Because honestly, I miss it. Like, I miss that being behind the bar. I miss seeing the people. I miss seeing people excited to see you. And kind of hearing about the days. The piece that I've always found different about being in a brewery versus like a bar, and not to like try to like point any fingers or like shit on anybody, but like when I think of like a bar, like the drunk at the end of the bar, they're like, is a very different viewpoint than people sitting at a brewery. That it feels more like they're there to be with their friends and family, and they're there to be part of a community, not they're there to like drown their sorrows. And of course, like that happens. I'm not gonna say that never happens, but in general,
not
like,
always the case.
Yeah, but in general, it has more of that feeling of people are just there to like socialize and be part of something bigger than just their day to day.
But they too share that. They too share that love for craft, right? We're talking about craft, so people appreciate the complexity of the recipes. I mean, not all recipes are complex, but the love and the art of shaping and creating these great brews that go out. People like talking about that, right? Like, I mean,
being part of something unique, special.
Absolutely. And to your point, it goes beyond just I'll have my regular lager, or I'll have my regular whiskey Coke, or I'll have my Coke, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe just a Coke. But
I feel like Campbell summarized it really well. One, she had that Hefeweizen that brought her back to home.
Yeah.
It was such a cool story. Like, if you need like a story to rejuvenate why you're in the craft beer scene, that story just warmed my heart. But then in addition, like, she talks so much about the community and how different that community is. Of like, you go in and it's like Cheers. Everybody knows your name and you've got your people, and you're there because you don't know who's going to show up. And like, usually I feel like the breweries are a little bit smaller, and you see a lot of your same repeat people, and you don't know who you're going to like ebb and flow and see. And it just creates this nice, lovely group of people that I love it. And I definitely go through waves where I miss it. And so instead, this is like, what do you talk to these people about? And like, for me, like, having that passion of, not only is there less women in this space, and a lot of times like they tend to be more front of the house. Like, unfortunately, I've had many situations where I feel like I really had to like prove myself, especially against like the homebrew bros. I feel like they know everything, and my passion's never been the brewing process. Like, my passion has been these stories, the community, the focus, and like, how can I be an expert in those spaces, in those ways, to have this conversation that I can maybe talk more about like the history behind the beer versus the brewing process behind the beer, because I don't have a lot of knowledge behind that because I've never done it. And that is like a big passion point of why I wanted to get this started, and why I wanted to get this started with you is, let's talk about those things. Let's give people this fun extra stuff to talk about that maybe they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And it's this whole other area where you can be an expert outside of just brewing.
Also, like, if you're an entertainer, right? I feel like...
Perfect. Yeah. Great way to put that.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely talk about an aspect of entertaining. I mean, not only... right? We're always talking about senses, or I am, right? Like, you're visually seeing you go and pour this beautiful beer, right? And then it comes back to me, and we can talk about it, because enthusiasts are also excited about the art of it, right? Sure, you have maybe your 4 or 5 staple beers on, and maybe you've got enough room for 4 or 5 experimental beers. So you, as a brewer, get to be very artistic and creative and the recipe process and what you're going to put out for people. And I think that's another like huge reason why people come into the craft brew scene, because they're like, well, what do you got this week, right? Like, what beers you're releasing? Like, that's incredibly exciting. Yeah. Now you combine that with you behind the bar, the bartender, the entertainer, right? Like, you get to present it and make it a showstopper, right? Yeah. Like, walk it on the catwalk. Like, how does it look?
Walk it on the catwalk.
Body by beer, like, let it shake a little bit. You got to move the hips.
I just want like the stop. Was it the stop go animation of just like this like tall Pilsner glass, like doing this sexy catwalk down the bar?
Would you like to talk to me about Pilsner?
The foam flies out. It's
Can you
amazing.
make that cartoon happen? I think that would be pretty great.
I could try, but it's
Yeah.
probably not going to turn out about as good as me actually walking a catwalk.
With a Pilsner and you like spill it over your shoulder. You're like, oh, that's bad
I break
luck.
my ankle because I'm wearing heels.
Yeah, so the entertainment, the artistic approach to it, right? I think that goes far beyond just, well, this is what I'm used to, this is what I like. And I'm all about that, right? Because there's a great community and being able to go down to your local bar and just be like, you know what? I really like beer. I'm going to have a beer today. And they have a classic like bar food menu. Nothing wrong with that, you know? And 'tis the football season, right? Like that's a perfect place to incorporate not just beer and beer or beer and liquor, but like beer and sports, right? And you get to relate on a level of beyond just a simple taste. It could be a simple taste in a recipe or a simple taste in a recipe. And we also gather here with our family friends for a sporting event or whatever, or just to say hello. Whereas traditionally, historically, like I know you've put out some good videos. I mean, people have been gathering for time over time, and time over time, there's always an alcoholic beverage involved, whether it's beer, spirits, or wine. Again, if you're talking over war stories, because you made it back from the battlefield somehow, you know, back when they were pulling the big swords and daggers. Can you imagine getting your leg chopped off with one of those things? You would celebrate. No. You would come home and celebrate after a large war campaign. I don't know really how I got there, but I was thinking about that earlier. And like,
because you were stuck on metal from the metal fest.
The metal is inside me. The fire burns
what
from
else
within.
Is metal? Swords.
Well, you got to have a good blacksmith around, for sure. Forged in the fire of metal. So this right here is also really a huge part, like that banter, right? Like you go, you have a beverage. Maybe you just needed to laugh that day, or you wanted to tell a story or hear a story, right? Like, lie to me. I don't care. Like, tell me something about your day. Like, that was always like one of my favorite parts, is being like, oh, hey, how's your day going? You're like, oh, you know, pretty good. It's pretty easy. I pour a beer. People lie to me. Like, whatever. And I don't mean that in like a bad way, but right. Like, you love stories. Maybe you exaggerate stories. I definitely do that. But, that sense of community is whether you just needed to talk to somebody, or maybe you had a story to tell. And sometimes people are just down and gone.
I always like telling people when they'd come in and be like, oh man, I had this really bad day, but I don't want to talk about it. And I'd be like, oh good, I really didn't want to hear about your shitty day.
That's a good bartender.
Like, oh good, I didn't want to hear you bitch about it for the next 20 minutes.
And either you got like the wide eyes, or they're like,
say that to people you know are gonna laugh at it.
Well, it depends on your day too.
Would not recommend that as an opening line to a stranger.
You never know; it might crack the seal, break the seal.
Break the seal.
Pretty cool.
Those are. I mean, those are the reasons we love the industry. That's why we got into this, and why we wanted to keep talking about beer and giving hopefully some people some fun facts and fun things to talk about, and some food pairings, and kind of spark this deeper history in things that, you know, you go into work and you can be like, hey, we released a Doppelbock, and here's this crazy story I heard about this Doppelbock, and people love that. They love hearing those stories.
Do you have a crazy story about a Doppelbock?
No, I think the Doppelbock one was like the scraping out of the tanks, right?
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be the shit beer.
Yeah, well,
but
it's really clean. Not. It's the clean guck of the tank beer. It's the leftover guck that pops out of it. Yeah. It's like, what a funny story for the like next time you like pour a bock, you're like, hey, do you know? This is the guck from our tanks because we finally cleaned them this year.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for us, it was, how do we keep that spirit alive and get more people excited and involved in the space?
And from arguably a different perspective, right? Like that front of the house, entertainment, excitement perspective. Maybe not so much about the brewing science, which we're all about, right? Supporting those who support that. But there's some really great, and I'm sure if you've seen them, but there's some really great like service industry TikToks out there that kind of poke fun at the roles behind the bar, behind the counter, behind the apron, so to speak. But although we're pretty funny, not funny on that level that we can produce that content every week, but to lighten on our perspective, you can totally cut this because I'm just rambling, but like that just front of the house entertainment and history.
We found a lot of videos that talk about how to brew this beer and like the brewing science behind this. And we're not brewers, so we didn't really want to focus on that. We wanted to focus on, well, we loved being front of the house, and what are the things we loved about it, and what are things that I know other people love about it. Like, we'd go in and release a new beer, and one of our fellow coworkers was like, well, why did they name it that? And I'm like, I don't know, let's look it up. And we found some fun story. And like, that was the story we told everybody through the whole ship, because it gave us something fun and unique to talk about. And honestly, as much as I love that part, like the job in itself, it just, you can kind of run out of some stuff to talk about. So instead, like, here's some new fun things. I loved looking up different quirks about beers to talk to people about.
Absolutely.
Fun.
Absolutely.
So, for me, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm here.
I have a fun fact for you, fun fact lover. Did you know that the strongest beer in the world has an ABV of 67.5%?
No, and that sounds awful.
It does kind of sound terrible.
Like
it's more like a spirit than a beer, for sure. So it's called snake venom.
Appropriate.
Yeah, fair.
It's going to kill you.
It's brewed in Moray.
Don't drink it in a pint.
Ooh, maybe just like 2 ounces. So it's brewed in Moray from smoked peated malt. Moray. Using 2 varieties of yeast, 1 beer, 1 champagnon.
Okay, I was wondering.
The only French I know. And what's that?
Is it oui?
Oui. So apparently, like other high ultra beers, what they do is it's frozen several times after the fermentation process, and then the ice crystals are removed.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before the segment, and initially when you said it, I was like,
I don't get it.
That's super weird. Why would you do it? And then I was like, oh yeah, because you can remove the water by freezing. It's actually like a really elementary way to like remove water.
Concentrating the alcohol.
Yeah. Like I never had ever thought about that's how you can concentrate alcohol.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's just really
snake venom.
Really simple.
You can Google that. It's out there. Well, you don't have to put hot sauce behind it because I don't think it's as graphic of a Google search.
Make sure.
yeah, I guess you never know.
Don't forget to put sauce behind the Ask Asher.
Ask Asher hot sauce, not Ask Asher sauce.
Hot sauce.
Ask Asher. Well, I don't know. Good luck.
Yeah.
Godspeed.
Just don't send us screenshots of what show up on your Google. We don't want to know.
One more, since you're a joke lover and a fun fact history buffet. I have a joke for you. Are you ready?
I don't know if I'm ready. Based on the look on your face, I don't know if I've had enough coffee for this joke.
We could have more coffee or more beer.
Yeah, fair. Also helps.
Why did the beer go to school?
I don't know.
Because it wanted to be a little brighter. Brighter.
Like you drink a burr? Like you drink a burr?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
No. Well, that's all I got.
I feel like
burr writer. Beer writer? Burr writer?
Why did the beer start an Etsy store?
Why?
Because it wanted to be a craft beer. See, I just made that up, and that's way better than
that is way better.
Writer.
I spent like 30 minutes on that joke, if you believe it or not. It took me at least 20 minutes to add the 3 extra R's into burr writer. Ooh, what if I add another R?
Beer writer? Is it supposed to be beer writer?
Beer writer. Burr writer.
No, I still don't get it.
No,
but I kind of like the Etsy one now.
Good one, Chelsea.
Thanks.
That's funny stuff.
That's wild.